Just to alert our sensitive viewers, this episode may contain a bit of coarse language.
This week's episode explores themes of a mature nature that may not be suitable for all audiences. Additionally, we address topics that may be difficult for some to engage with, including sexual coercion and assault and rape culture. If these may be triggering for you, please approach this content with care and with a community of support, or skip this one and be sure to join us for later episodes. We recognize the importance of discussing some of these themes, but also want you to remain safe, secure, and regulated whenever and wherever possible. Please reach out if you have questions or concerns, and thank you for being a part of the Disability Tangent community. Hello everyone, my name is Christy Blumendahl.
And my name is Rocco Catroni, and we are the Disability Tangent Podcast.
Each episode, we talk about current issues affecting communities while supporting people with disabilities.
Through research, community connections, and resource sharing, we hope to invite everybody to challenge their perceptions of people with disabilities and promote a more inclusive world.
Defined by what the people actually want and not what others think they want.
Come join us on this journey.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Disability Tangent Podcast. Last week, we started a discussion with Suzannah Weiss, sex coach, educator, and author of Subjectified, Becoming a Sexual Subject. We talked about consent. We talked about how awkwardness is better than boundary violation. And about the power of instinct and the power of telling our own stories. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to that episode if you haven't had a chance. But we left in the middle of a discussion of how neurodiverse people might find it liberating to break societal rules around dating and relationships. And so today we are going to pick up the discussion there.
Some relationship rules or relationship scripts or relationship advice may not work for autistic people or neurodiverse people. Some of the biggest cliches, playing it cool, which I don't think really works for anyone, but the idea that you have to pretend that you don't like someone that much. Or one thing that I've thought about is this idea that it's unhealthy to be obsessed with someone. I think some autistic people are prone to being obsessed. I don't think I've ever been in love with someone and not been obsessed. And I feel like maybe that's okay. It's shaming neurodiversity to be you're too obsessed. Just if it makes you happy, be obsessed with what you're obsessed with. That's one example. Or rules needing to sleep in the same bed with someone may not work for some neurodiverse people. So I think it can be very liberating to break the rules and say, maybe I'll create my own. Don't chase men. That's another thing that it just doesn't work for me. I mean, not to a stalkerish extent, but if I like someone, I'm going to let them know. I don't feel like putting on the whole pretense. So, I'm just too busy to text you. No, if I want to talk to you, I'm going to let you know. I don't know how to mask that much. Mm-hmm. And I think it can be really liberating to do the things society says is bad relationship advice.
Mm-hmm. And I love that because I think that provides a level of clarity that maybe people are really trying to seek instead of trying to play this weird nuanced game that even people who are not neurodivergent don't get. It's confusing for people. And I think that's something that's just, I don't know, needs to change. I like, one of the things as you were talking about some of these changes, especially around playing it cool, reminds me, I have two small children and we watch a lot of TV shows, right? And one of the things that I've noticed on a few of the shows they have is when people are engaging and trying to play it cool, that trying to play it cool and not being their authentic self is almost ridiculed now in those cartoons that are happening and those animations. And it made me think, a lot of the shows that I watched growing up was, that playing it cool was the thing that wasn't ridiculed. And then when someone was just quirky or something like that, it was the basis of a rom-com. It's, oh, look, this is so unexpected. And it's, well, no, this is just how people act. And that should be honored too. So I'm hoping that, like, even in some of the media of how things are shifting for like the small kids going into growing up, and that we have more examples of that authenticity being the thing that's reinforced and not the mask that you have to put on in the variety of places that you're in. So I don't know, maybe there's hope.
Although ridiculing people trying to play it cool, like, you can't
Also is
win. Like, then
problematic. Yeah.
it's it's still uncool if you act like you're neurodiverse, and then it's also uncool if you mask. So then, like, what is left to do? But that can also be liberating. Like, I am
Hmm.
gonna lose either way, so I might as well do whatever feels best, even if that means masking. Like,
Hmm.
there may be some situations where masking just makes you more comfortable, and I think
Hmm.
that's also okay.
Absolutely.
Like, one I think this may relate to autism, that I think a lot about what I do with my face. What expression am I making? Is it pleasant? What kind of smile looks best? And like, I had someone tell me that my face looks unnatural because I do that. And I'm like, you know what? It's like more unnatural for me to try to be natural at this point because I'm so used to thinking about my face. Like, I can't not. So I'll just look unnatural.
Yeah.
It's
That
fine.
I that's something we've had friends say to me before even too, especially on Zoom where I can see my own face and then I start reacting. I'm like, what am I doing? And I'm like, was I always doing this? And when I tried to change that in the moment or tried to not have a particular reaction to that, people in my close circle of friends, and I know, Christy, you and I have talked about this before. You're like, what are you trying to do right now? I'm like, I'm trying to listen. And you're like, what's wrong with your face? But it's like when I'm actively trying to change it based on a context, then it looks almost worse than just letting it flow. And I think that that's something I've run into, is especially as a neurodivergent individual myself, of just being in a space where you can just be and not have to think about every aspect of how you're presenting yourself can be liberating in a lot of ways. But I think it's really funny that you mentioned that piece.
I think it's best not to judge either, not to judge
Mm-hmm.
not masking and not to judge masking. It can be endearing to be like, oh, am I being polite and am I coming off all right? There's nothing wrong with that. And there's also nothing wrong with like just letting yourself go. I think it's best to have non judgments overall.
Yeah.
And I also think everyone probably does I don't know. I think it's so common to self monitor over Zoom
I
or
think, yeah,
any
I think
video
so many
platform.
people do it because you can see yourself and hear yourself in ways that you didn't before. So it just is, yeah, it's a different world to be in. And I think I do different things in different contexts. So there are people that I'll just be totally myself with and open up. And then there's other times when I am a little bit weird because that's not really me. That's not my attitude or and I'll have people that are like, "Oh, you're constantly so happy." And I'm like, "Am I? I think I'm kind of an asshole most of the time." But I'm like pretending to be really happy because I feel like that's the context that we're in. I'm supposed to be that way. I'm supposed to have a smile pasted on. And then there are times when I just can't pretend at all. Like we've been in meetings where Rocco was like, "Oh, please let Christy's face not show what she thinks right now." like she's gonna show what she thinks on her face and it's gonna be bad. And he was like, "Oh no, she covered it. It's fine. I know she felt it, but she didn't show it." So I think there's so much to that, like that you learn to be a particular way, and we all do it to some extent, right? Neurotypical people also
Mm-hmm.
manage their faces and their responses in certain ways, but then as neurodiverse people, we do it even more so, maybe. And I think we judge ourselves more harshly for doing it because we know that it's a part of what we do. And then we're like, oh, but it's one of the things on the line when it says, here's your diagnosis, here's the thing you do, you mask. It's one of the check marks on the diagnosis. And so because it's a check mark on the diagnosis, you think to yourself, that's a bad thing, instead of looking at it in a non-judgmental way that says, oh, that's just a thing that happens to define a group of people, right? Like curly haired people, you have curly hair, check mark. You mask in particular ways, check mark. Like, why is one just a thing that exists and then the other is somehow a deficiency? But we look at it as a deficiency because it's part of a diagnosis. So things that are diagnostic in nature then become something that's not good, and other things are maybe just a thing that exists in our life. And why do we have to say one is bad and one is just a natural existing thing? It's a really interesting concept. And I wonder if there's a way to change that or look at it differently and be like, oh, yeah, that's a thing that exists in this particular group. Just like curly hair exists for some of us and not for all of us.
Yeah, masking is also a survival strategy. So if people don't want us to mask, then the world needs to change so that we don't have to. Until then, sometimes we need to. People have told me that my facial expression, that I have a poker face, and then some people tell me that my emotions are so readable on my face and I can't hide them. And I'm curious if that is something, I don't know. Do you relate to that at all? Is that, I know the poker face is an autistic thing. The part about the opposite is really interesting, that there's this duality, that it's somehow both.
I have similar. Oh, sorry, Rocco.
I think.
No, I have similar
Oh
statements
no,
said
go for
about
it.
me. That one, like, I always look this, like, you can't tell what I'm thinking. And then the other will be like, I had a friend who, like, when he was preaching, would watch my face. He was like, you're always honest with your emotion. I can tell by your face exactly what you think of what I just said. So yeah, it was the two different things, this like dual way of relating. And I don't know if I'm doing something different in that moment or if the person perceiving me is different in that moment. So that's a really interesting thing. Yeah, because I've never really thought about it. Am I behaving in a different way in this context versus that context? Or are the people perceiving me able to note something different in me than the other people perceiving me? That's a really interesting concept. What were you going to say, Rocco?
I think the people that are closer to me notice the changes and my own facial expressions with that, where like usually it's very open. I wear my emotions on my sleeve, but more specifically, I know, Christy, you and I have talked about this. I've talked about this with some of my other friends as well. If I get mad or there's something that I completely disagree with, the all emotion shuts down in my face completely. And they say sometimes that's almost more unnerving, where if they recognize that, they're like, uh-oh, what happened? Like, where is that like level? And I feel like I've started to notice more of those pieces, but it does seem kind of like that dichotomy. And it seems like that the more typical Rocco of my daily is very animated, very this, but then whenever it slips into that, then it's zero animation, but there's no like range in between that.
Yeah, what you're saying makes me think, I think sometimes my face doesn't show emotion because the emotions I'm having are private. And maybe other people can't control it. But I've had situations where people are like, I can't read your face. I can't tell what you're thinking. And I'm like, again, I don't know you. I don't owe you knowledge about what I'm thinking. Like, maybe that's because you're pissing me off and it's not appropriate to say why. Or maybe it's because I'm stressed out about something and that's not what we're talking about. And I don't know, maybe the same way as some autistic people say they have selective empathy, maybe we have like selective emotional expression. Like, it's not intentional, like I'm hiding something. But if I don't think my emotions are for that person or for that scenario, like my face may just not show them because it's just neither here nor there.
That makes a lot of sense to me, actually. Yeah.
And it's like another sort of social scripts we may have to rewrite. Like, I don't owe you an emotional reaction to anything you're saying. I don't owe you feedback about how I feel about you. Like, I'm just trying to get through the day. It can be empowering to say, okay, your neurotypical rule is that I somehow owe you feedback on my face about how I feel about you or something. But do I really? Like, again, if you don't feel comfortable with someone, maybe that's for a reason, and you get to open up to people at your own pace.
And that perspective is completely blowing my mind, and I feel like pretty introspective right now, trying to think of different instances around the thought that I, person, respond in a particular way, therefore you, listener, should respond in a way to me. And I've almost always thought about that in the context of giving and receiving things, be it in a sexual situation, intimate situations, work situations, but I've never thought about that from facial or even just like small like niceties of you. I don't know. We always joke about that, like in the Midwest. Oh, how's your day going? Oh, it's going great. Actually, here's the 50 things that are actually going wrong with me right now. that there's like all these like expectations that you have to say, yeah, I'm having a good day. Or
someone at the grocery store once harped on that because he asked how I'm doing. I'm like, not good. He's like, are you okay? I'm like, no, but that's all right. That's my problem. And then he's like, no, but are you okay? I'm like, no, I just said no, but people can't handle it.
Yeah.
That might be another autistic thing because we take things literally. It really bothers me when people ask questions and expect you to lie.
Yeah.
I do. Sometimes you just say all right or not my best, but all right, because you do not want to get into a whole conversation.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to engage in the second half of whatever this is because I am being truthful. Oh my goodness. And it almost seems then, if then you say that you're not okay, then are we then socialized of, well, I have to fix this right now, and we always have to have this like level of completely being okay. Yeah. And I don't know, sometimes when I'm upset, I just want to sit in it. We're like, no, I'm not okay right now, but I need to figure out what I need. And you, person on the other side of the grocery line, you don't need to fix this for me. You just say, oh, that sucks. I hope your day goes as well as it can. I don't know. Like, what other kinds of scripts could we teach people that's not this, like, this algorithm of this person says this. There's only two options here.
Another pet peeve I have is if you're crying and someone's like, are those sad tears or happy tears? And it's like, you have to say happy tears so they'll leave you alone. Yeah. Like, it's not okay to cry sad tears, apparently, which actually feels really good for me. It gets the sadness out, but it's not acceptable. Like, other people are always like, don't cry. Or someone recently told me, you're prettier when you smile. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Like, we are taught to put our prettiness above our mental health or our social propriety above our need to do things like cry that are actually healing. And I won't pander to people's egos. Yeah. That's all it is, just people wanting to be like, oh, but am I a good person? Am I doing enough to make sure you're not crying? No, if there's nothing you can do, just let me. And if that's hard for your ego, deal with that on your own.
Yeah, because what's reinforced is that, like, you did the checkbox, right? Like, you checked in on the person, or you did this, but what happens afterwards if the person's like, no, actually, I'm not feeling okay, or maybe I do need additional help, and then the person was like, oh god, that's not the kind of feedback I thought I was going to get. That doesn't seem to be the thing that's, I don't know, reinforced with people. And that's
I think it's interesting too, because there's nothing fixable about many situations. So like the concept of, oh, well, I'm going to ask you how you are, and then you're going to say I'm shitty, and then you're going to be like, oh, how can I help? And then I'll be like, well, you can't help unless you can do this, that, and that. And then they'll be like, well, I can't do that. And then it's like, okay, well, then you can't help, right? So, well, why are you shitty? Well, I'm shitty because my apartment complex won't make my door accessible for my wheelchair, and also my food stamps got reduced, and also I'm not happy with my cousin right now, and my hair is falling out a little bit. So I have 17 things in my life that are currently like not great
Yeah.
that I would like to have be better. And are you going to fix any of those? Are you going to
Mm,
stand up for me? Are you going to go to court for me? Are you going to call the landlord for me? Are you going to like what are you going to do? Nothing. You're going to do nothing because you don't actually
mhm,
give a shit about changing the systemic shit storm that is happening right now to people who are not in your
mhm,
particular class of human, and therefore you're not going to do anything. So you don't want to hear that I'm not doing well because of the system being broken, because you don't actually have anything invested in fixing the broken system, nor do you want to. You want to just go about your day and not think about the fact that there are all of these problems happening for other people that are probably fixable, but it's
mhm.
going to take a lot of effort, time, money, etc. to fix those problems. You don't want to do it. So that's the other thing, right? Is can you fix it? Well, yes. Can you fix it
Yeah.
now? No. Can you fix it in a way that doesn't mean you might have to sacrifice time, money, investment, whatever? Also, no. Like how do you get there? So
Maybe people just don't know what to do in those moments. Like, that here's this piece that I'm feeling bad about. You say, "Oh, how's your day going?" "Oh, it's really crappy." "Oh, can I do anything?" "Yeah." "Can you fix late stage capitalism?" No.
Someone once gave me a coupon for a restaurant when I said I was doing badly. I feel like that's the best
right?
thing you
That
can
would
do.
be
That's
fantastic. If I was
amazing.
like, I'm having a really hard time, and they were like, here's some pizza, I would be like, fuck yes, thank you. That is absolutely what I needed, right?
Yeah.
Like a massage, some pizza, like anything practical that would just make my day better. Hello?
I'm gonna start
Or
carrying
just
coupons around for
that
that.
other
That's
person cares.
amazing. Yeah.
I should actually, sometimes you get those magazines with coupons. I should save those just for that circumstance
Yes.
Yeah.
where someone, not that I'm in that situation a lot,
Yeah.
but
But when it does, I
but
mean,
if we
that's
all did it, then more people might admit if they're
Yes.
not doing well.
yeah.
Um,
How's your day going? Well, it's going really shitty. Wow, would a 15% off coupon at your
Yes.
favorite pizza place help?
Good.
Maybe a little bit.
Love it.
Another thing that's hard for me with my literal autistic mind is that when someone says sorry, you're supposed to say it's okay. Because if they're saying sorry, then it's probably not okay.
Yeah.
And so I either say I forgive you if I do, or I just say thank you. Thank you. I'll take your apology into consideration.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Yes.
Like
Sorry.
No, I
Acknowledgement.
can't
appreciate
lie.
that
Yeah.
though, because I feel like, yeah, when
Hmm.
because it's not okay. It's often not okay. Like I'm sorry. You should be sorry. you should be sorry.
Don't say
Right?
sorry. Just don't do
Change
it
your
again.
behavior, damn it. Yeah, like that's what I feel like saying often. I
I'd be the real
appreciate that.
sorry.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
probably use that. Thank you.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'll just take that apology and
Right.
receive it and not give you
Yeah.
anything.
Exactly.
The same as
I'm sorry.
compliments, right? I'm
Acknowledgement.
learning to take in
Cool.
compliments with gratitude. So I will also take in apologies with gratitude. Thank you for apologizing. Thank you for complimenting me. Thank you for the things. Yeah.
Mhm.
I will say I forgive you if it's true, but do you think that people should always be forgiven? That's something I've been going back and forth about because, like, people say
Mhm.
forgiveness is for you, it's to heal yourself. So I'm like, okay, should I forgive everyone or is some things just
Rocco and
unforgivable?
I are both
Like,
shaking our heads like no,
can forgive
no.
No, because I mean, Chris, we literally had this conversation like probably 11 days ago. And because it seems like with expectations like that, the forgiveness piece of it, like maybe eventually you could get to a point where you're forgiven, but right now, your behavior made me operate at a level 15 out of 10, and I'm not in a place to forgive you right now, or think about this long enough to do that. So I I agree with that. I I don't think, at least in the moment, has to be forgiven. I mean, maybe over time, but that should be up to the person then to decide whether or not it's something that can be like exonerated in some sense. And maybe some of those things aren't. There's things and that are unforgivable in general, but I feel like unforgivable is also like a huge range of things. There's like the horrible, awful, unforgivable things that change and alter the way you perceive and react to life, that are unforgivable. But there's also like unforgivable where it's like, I don't know, you broke my favorite mug, and I don't really forgive you for that. Like, that stinks, but it's not this horrible, awful thing that's occurred to me. But I also don't feel like I have to make you feel better because you broke my favorite thing.
I
Like,
think
I
there
wonder if
is,
there's
and
like a
like
spectrum
I'm
of
still
forgiveness in a
pissy
way.
at the assistant who baked my sourdough starter. I'm still mad about it. I get to be mad about it. I don't know. It's a really strange thing for me also, because I literally have a certification in forgiveness and Ho'oponopono, and Ho'oponopono is a forgiveness practice, and I think that can be really good. I think it can be really helpful to forgive people if you are in a state where you want to forgive people. And I think that part of that forgiveness is letting it go from your own consciousness, but I don't think that you forgive people who are continuing to act and react in the ways that they are acting and reacting. I think that past things can maybe be let go, but things that are currently happening, people that have maintained bad behavior and are maintaining bad behavior, I don't think those people need to be forgiven anything. I don't think that people who don't show remorse need to be forgiven for things. I think that a lot of people just pay lip service to things like, oh, I'm really sorry, but they're not sorry. Or, when you tell your kid, say sorry to your sister, and they're like, sorry. Like, they aren't sorry. They don't give a shit. You forced them to say that. Like, it's not a situation where there was any like remorse shown or that the lesson was necessarily learned. And I think that what we do, our behaviors have consequences. And until you can take responsibility for the consequences of your actions, I don't think that you have learned any lessons. I feel this way a lot of times. This is going to really get into it, but so a lot of my trauma comes from childhood sexual assault and childhood rape. And this is like deep in the shit right now, but this happened. So, like, this person has said, oh, I'm sorry, please forgive me. But that person does not care to understand or is incapable of understanding, I think, that the trauma that happened as a child has influenced all of my relationships, all of what happened for the rest of my life, and still affects me today. I am in therapy, I am doing EMDR, I am trying to work out my shit. Like, this is still a thing today, still affects me today. I got into abusive relationships. I had a bad relationship with my own daughter in many ways. All of this stuff, even some of my neurodivergence is because of trauma that happened in childhood. My brain literally is not formed like a quote unquote normal average brain because of the trauma that happened when I was a child. And so this person is not ready to take responsibility for that. And so nothing needs to be forgiven because he hasn't taken responsibility for that. And I think there are moments where you can say, oh, I forgive this. But there are many moments when you don't need to. And that's fine. And I think that people just want to force everything into compliance. They want to force everyone and everything into this state that's not um In school, in history class, they talk about the Pax Romana, like this false peace in Rome, like before the fall of the of Roman society. There was this false sense of peace where they were like, oh, everything's good, but everything wasn't good because it was two classes of people, and there was these people up here, and there were these people getting smashed to death down here. And so it was not a good society. It was a society built on the backs of these other people. And I think that's what people are constantly trying to force us into, is this concept of like false peace, this Pax Romana or Pax Americana, if we want to like put it in some kind of, words for today. We're like, oh, I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay. I'm okay, you're okay, we're all okay. Right? But we're not fucking okay, and it's not okay, and nobody is okay. And don't make me say I'm okay. I'm not okay with what you did. I'm not gonna be okay with what you did. And can you not look at me and go, oh, she's not fucking okay, that's not fucking okay, she's, whoa, that's fucking crazy, right? But it's not because I'm crazy, it's because you did crazy shit to me, and that is what happened, and this is the consequence of that. So like, I want people to be in a space where we don't have to force fake okays. We can understand that this is a mess, but it's not a mess because of my brain. It's a mess because everybody's messing up shit. And can we stop messing up shit? Don't make me forgive you for messing shit up. And don't make me apologize for being a mess. That was a big tangent. Absolutely. Sorry, that was a big one.
Both of those conventions, saying you're okay and saying it's okay, have this common thread of pretending everything's okay. And what if we want to create a conspiracy theory, like, isn't what the powers that be, isn't that what they would want, for us to think that everything happening in the world is okay?
Just letting it be.
And just going about our lives.
It seems bad. Just trust it. No, this is an abusive relationship. Well, and so, I mean, for you, I mean, do you think there are situations where forgiveness is not something that is in the cards?
There are multiple definitions of forgiveness. I think that's what makes it hard to answer. Like, I was thinking about if I forgive the man who sexually assaulted me, and I was thinking, well, I don't think about him a lot. I don't feel angry toward him, really. It's my priority to keep myself away from him, not to empathize with him, not to reconcile with him. But in a way, I've forgiven him because I've moved on. And because I don't carry bitterness about that situation, because I feel empowered in how I responded to it. So is that forgiveness? I think that counts as forgiveness, especially, I think more forgiveness than that would be unhealthy. If I was like, well, he was really wounded from his childhood and he didn't know anything better, so I forgive him. Like, that's over empathizing, I think. I think sometimes the best form of forgiveness is just moving on. I don't know if that's forgiveness or not, but I think it should count.
I like that because there's a release to it of, exactly like you said, right? I mean, I don't actively think about this individual all the time, and there's a certain, I don't know, comfort and safety in that, but also I'm going to avoid this person, or if those things come up, those are things that we need to be weary of.
I'm having like a Taylor Swift moment.
I'd say that's like, forgiveness.
I forgot that you existed. Where like, I forgot that you existed. Like, I've literally had that with people where someone would say their name and I'd be like, oh yeah, that I dated that guy. Oh yeah, he cheated and did a whole bunch of bullshit, and I contracted herpes, and like all of the bullshit happened. But I forgot that happened. I forgot about that person, which I think is a form of forgiveness, right? Because it doesn't hold sway over you anymore. It doesn't matter in the same way. So yeah, I think that absolutely counts.
I think that's the most genuine form of forgiveness, or at least of moving on. I think if you're still thinking about forgiving that person in the sense of I empathize with them, I see where they were coming from, you're kind of still stuck in the situation. Um, I think like indifference, like they say the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. I think indifference is probably the purest form of moving on. I also had a Taylor Swift moment, but it was a different one. I saw this video of her on Instagram where she was saying, you can forgive and forget. No, she said, you can move on without forgiving or forgetting, which I think is also true. You can say, this person was a douchebag and I want nothing to do with them. I don't like them. I don't forgive them. And also, I'm just
like
going
they
to
don't
like
have to
stop
mean
thinking about
anything
them.
for me anymore. Yeah. Which I completely agree with. I think that is totally fair. And I think, some people are really uh, judgy about like the idea of going no contact with people in your family or people, that you have some sort of ties to. I I feel like that can be one of the best
Mhm.
things for creating a space for this forgiveness is to go no contact with people and just be like, "You know what?
Mhm.
You don't need to have a space in my life," because that can be one of the ways to let that go, to be like, "You know what? You don't have a space. There's no reason for me to think about you. I am indifferent." And I think that has been really, really good for me, uh, to kind of let go of
Mhm.
s some of these situations in my own life, is to just not have contact with people who have been abusive. Because I don't need to empathize with a narcissistic abuser. Right.
I don't
Mhm.
want to get in
That's
that
not a
person's
place
mind.
that's not a place
No,
that we need to sit. And,
absolutely.
like, I'm all about understanding, I'm all about
Yeah.
empathy, but there's a boundary line there where, like, no, I don't need to feel what it feels like to be a narcissistic abuser. Like, that's a not okay space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
and I think that kinda ties into what we were talking about before. I mean, but in all sorts of relationships, though, of that expectation of, oh, because this person's family, or, oh, because they are male and there's a fog associated with it, or there's a lot of these expectation components that are there. And I think for me, having done that, where we make that separation and not continuing that contact with people, I know that ultimately it's better for myself, for the people that are close to me. It's also really hard because there's a lot of guilt that I feel around that as well, because I still have those expectations in my head of like, well, they are family, or they were a really good friend, or they were that. And it's accepting in some ways a loss associated with that, and giving that space. We fill it with some stuff, that recorder from society that we've been having in our head.
Do you ever feel really conflicted about cutting off contact with someone, but then a few months later, once you've actually done it, you're like, that was totally the right decision. That was such an unhealthy relationship. But at the time, I think when you're like, even if it's just a friend, not necessarily romantic or family, but when you're in connection with them, you're more prone to seeing their side, to making excuses for them. And then you're
Yeah.
out and you're like, whoa, what was I just in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some of those relationships, it was, yeah, you know what? I'm glad there's absolutely zero contact. And in other relationships, it was, okay, well, this level of contact now is better. Like it's not this talking frequently or seeing each other in person, but every once in a while, there's like a small little message, and that level of connection. I'm like, that's okay. Like, I feel good with that. But I don't know, varies on, I don't know, depending on the situations and on the people as well. For me personally, I don't know. What about you?
I I mean, I recently cut off contact with a friend who was really the friendship wasn't healthy. It was just a lot. She was very nitpicky, very critical of me, very like it was all about her. But I felt so guilty cutting it off because I saw her side and I was like, well,
Mhm.
maybe she thinks she's helping, or maybe she's just not doing well. So it has to focus on her. Like there was this tendency to make excuses for her. And I felt so bad ending the friendship. And now a few months later, I'm like, no, that I feel bad now for staying in the friendship as long as
As
I
long.
did. But
Mhm.
but when you're in it and you're constantly exposed to the person and maybe they're gaslighting you into
Mhm.
thinking it is your problem, then you do feel like more positively toward that person. And it's scary because then you're like, who else in my life am I doing that with?
Yeah,
Like, who else in my life will I one day feel so glad I stopped talking to?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel that sometimes too of, am I that person to other people as well? Are there things that I'm not aware of that I'm doing, or I don't know. I feel like the context of our talk has been range, like offering yourself range, offering people range, that it's, you don't have to fit in these like little boxes or these sections, but people are going to like flip back and forth between things and be various levels of okay or kind or aware or goofy or whatever. And offering that as maybe that's one of the solutions that we have, of just offering those people the ability to, like, we're humaning, everybody's humaning the first time in their lives, right? And seeing if we can be okay with people figuring it out, and when it's not okay, being okay with cutting those ties off and
And
moving
maybe
on.
like being okay with where we are in that process, right? And knowing that we don't have to be connected to everyone else in that process. And I think that's maybe part of it. I think when I was young, I was sort of taught, oh, you have to be nice to everyone and you have to respect everyone and you have to connect with everyone, right? There was no, you get to set this boundary and you get to walk away and you get to not like that person and you get to just not interact with that person. And I think that's what a lot of times I needed, though, is I needed to just not interact with that person. I needed to walk away from that relationship. That was not healthy. And I needed to be given the permission, maybe, and the option to have my own space and to just not be a part of that. And I think a lot of times
Mhm.
the I don't know, the like idea that everyone who's in my life needs to be in my life doesn't compute anymore. Like people come, people go. The relationships might be good, maybe they're then not good, and then that's okay for them to leave. Like the idea that we're not locked into anything with anybody and we can walk away at any point. I think all of that sort of needs to be reinforced more because it wasn't for me. It was like, no, this is how you interact. You're nice. You're always nice. You're always good. You're always nice. And I think at this point in my life, I'm understanding that niceness and being nice to someone is different than being kind to someone or being loving to someone. And I think that nice is this kind of what we were talking about, putting on the fake face and not showing people our true emotions. Like that's nice. My mask is nice. And maybe that serves me in some
Mhm.
places, right? And that's okay. But for the most part, my true self is maybe the best self to be interacting with people and then saying, oh, no, this is my actual emotion. This is how I really feel. And I don't feel that way. And I don't want to connect in that way. Like, that's okay. I don't have to connect with everyone. Everyone doesn't have to be my friend. Everyone doesn't have to like me. Everyone doesn't have to be in my inner circle. Everyone doesn't have to date me. Everyone doesn't have to sleep with me. There are all of these lines that I can state and be okay with. And then other people's lines are okay also. My daughter didn't speak to me for almost 2 years. That sucked. There was a lot of grieving and a lot of like hard stuff that came with that. But also, that was a line. She drew that line. She was like, for me, I need to go no contact with you right now, mom. And I was like, okay, that's hard, but that is a thing that I need to respect. And now we do talk and things are good, but she needed that time. And that was a positive thing for both of us. So I think
that it's okay for us to draw these lines in the sand and say, you don't need to be in my life right now. I don't need to interact with you. And like to normalize that and say, we get to choose what we want in our lives and what we don't want in our lives. And that's totally okay. And nobody has to force anything on us, from like who we're friends with all the way down the line, to abusive, narcissistic, manipulative, weird, shamanistic sex bullshit. I don't know.
Yeah. I think a lot of us learn that from our parents. Like if we have parents who are abusive or toxic and they say, but I brought you into the world, or but I'm financially supporting you. And then you learn that you have to force yourself to like people or to treat people like you like them. Maybe for a lot of people, that's the first way they learn that. I also, for me though, like I've had experiences where setting boundaries went a little too far, like where I realized I could have talked to a person and said how I felt, and we could have had a conversation and gotten closer if they hurt me. But instead, I was just like, I'm not talking to you. And that actually foreclosed opportunities. So I think there's a balance between like speaking up for yourself and knowing when to do so in a way that keeps the connection. Because I think it came in part from just thinking people aren't going to listen to me anyway. So I should just walk away if someone hurts me rather than seeing if maybe they hate the fact that they hurt me and maybe they're willing to make up for it. And so maybe it's worth it to stay in connection with them.
Absolutely. Well, and I've really enjoyed where this conversation went too. How we started off talking about your book, the work that we're doing, and really digging into a lot of the relationship and the connection pieces and the expectations of culture and how that's placed and how that perpetuates over time. One of the things I wanted to ask you in general is, I'm sure there's other people that want to have the same level of connection and conversation with you, and that you do these courses and events. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, or how people can contact you or connect with you?
Sure, you could find me at my website, suzannahweiss.com, SUZANNAHWEISS. I do sex and love coaching. I also have a list of courses on my website, which you can get instantly. And I would also suggest reading my book, Subjectified, Becoming a Sexual Subject, which you can find on Amazon or just Google it. Does that answer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm definitely going to be reading your book. We have a long flight coming up soon, and I'm really, really excited to go through that, talk about that, and I'll definitely be reaching out with some questions and thoughts if you feel comfortable
Yeah,
doing
I
so.
also highly recommend the book. Obviously, you've already heard me.
Cool.
Fangirl away about the book. So that is amazing. I guess one sort of final question that I would ask is, what do you think we can all maybe be doing better to make sex and sexuality feel accessible for more people? I know we've kind of talked about it a little bit earlier on, but do you think there's things specifically that people listening could add to their repertoire, or, try to shift in their own thinking in order to make sex more accessible for more people?
I think if we broadened our definition of sex and saw it as something that could be inclusive of sensuality, of like getting naked and giving each other massages, or using sex toys, or taking a bath together, or even like sexting, sex over video. If we just saw all of these different things as counting as sex, then people who might have limitations on what they can do or what they want to do would see themselves as viable participants and
Mhm.
people who can enjoy their sexuality, and solo sex is sex as well. Um, yeah, if we just normalized all different ways of connecting, that it doesn't have to be penetration, it doesn't have to lead to orgasms, it can be expansive, even something that I teach sometimes is like lying in the sun and feeling the sun penetrating your pores. That could be a sexual experience. So I think if people see that all these things are sexual experiences, like there is something that's accessible to almost everyone.
Yeah, I love that.
It's like
Yeah.
offering people range, right? That it doesn't have to
And
be
like
these.
just making fewer assumptions, not assuming if someone gets in bed with you that they want to
Mhm,
fuck you, like just
mhm,
having conversations about what do you like, what is it that you want, what feels good to you. And that may not be penetration, that may not be the typical sexual script. So just normalizing, no, like me wanting to be fingered like doesn't mean that I want to fuck. Like
mhm,
um
mhm,
someone once said to me that, well, everything always just leads to intercourse anyway. That's a really limiting way to think about it.
mhm,
And it's also kind of a sex negative. Well, it can become a sex negative way to think about it, because then it's the context I often hear it in is like, well, it's a slippery slope. If you start something, it's just always going to lead to intercourse. And like, can we separate those things out? Um,
mhm.
like, not every physical interaction with someone is going to get you pregnant and lead to STIs.
Right? It doesn't have to be a worst case scenario every time you want to have some sort of sensual experience. I am a catastrophizer by nature, so I do often think of the worst case scenario. But yeah, when you're trying to have a sensual experience, you don't want to always have the worst case in your mind. So, yeah, to open that up and be like, oh no, this can be anything we want it to be. There's no end game. We can just be open and exploring and curious and yeah, figuring out what this is as we go. We can talk about it. We can figure it out together. I think that that makes it something new and exciting and positive. Yeah, rather than this, as you said, like, oh, we're gonna have a pregnancy and STI be the end,
Or
right?
that you
Yeah.
have to keep going as an expectation
Well, you
because
started. Now you
yeah.
gotta fit. No, you can quit at any time. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because it was from this thing a friend said to me, who's very Christian, or says he is at least, but I was going to a sex party and he was like, or I was trying to decide if I wanted to go, and he goes, well, is your husband going to be there? And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. So you believe like only sex within marriage? Then what sex defines sex? And he's like, well, it always ends up leading to fucking anyway. And that I feel like that's a narrative I often hear about from religious people or conservatives, and like, because they value purity and they want to make sure that you're safe and whatnot. And I think I wish we could bring those two worlds together of,
Mhm,
yes, like protecting my innocence and making sure I'm safe, and also like being open to exploring. And like, it does not have to be this all or nothing. Well, don't even step foot in a sex club, or else, you're going to fuck someone and it's going to be a bad
mhm,
experience. Like, I wish we could have more nuance of valuing like our it's challenging to even express it in a way that doesn't sound like purity culture, because I do
mhm,
believe like purity is a value of mine. Like, I want to make sure no negative energy like enters my field. But even
mhm,
saying that sounds almost shaming. Like, for me, purity just means making sure no negativity like enters my field, and then I'm only letting in positive people with positive intentions within my boundaries. And I wish
mhm,
there were more room to talk about it without it being sex negative. And I wish there were more room to talk about like sex positivity and sex like that is both pure and sexual.
Mhm.
Like,
Mhm.
it's hard to even have the
Yeah.
words for it.
I mean, I get that coming out of
Mhm.
religious background, and then also carrying a lot of shame as a divorced single mother in that context, and like all of that. I got in terrible trouble for telling students that I was, you know, in charge of or guiding, that I didn't think that pregnancy was the worst thing about premarital sex. And some of them went home and told their mothers that I had said pregnancy wasn't the worst thing about premarital sex, and that became a huge scandalous thing that I had said. But my point was that they could have sex with people who didn't honor and value and love them in appropriate ways, because, you know, when you've spent a lot of time with someone and you've been in a relationship with someone and you've committed to someone, you've usually gotten to this point of trust and love and care that is deeper than someone who you've just met at a bar and they take you home, and like that might not be, as you say, someone with positive energy and positive intentions coming into your space. And that was the point I was trying to make, is pregnancy is not maybe the worst thing. Maybe heartbreak and pain and feeling like you were used and like all of that stuff is also terrible. And I got like treated awful by these parents for saying that pregnancy wasn't the worst thing. And I'm a mom raising a child on my own, and they're saying no, being a single mom is the worst fucking thing. And I was like, thank you. Why are you telling me that my lifestyle is the worst possible outcome of sex? And this is interesting too, because Suzannah and I actually talked about this at lunch. One day we ended up in the same restaurant and had lunch together, and we talked about whether premarital sex is talked about in the biblical text, and whether there's actually a command of any sort that says you can't have consensual sex before marriage. It doesn't say that in the Bible. I studied the Bible for years, went to 2 seminaries, and it doesn't say that in the Bible. And then we had a discussion about it. And it says certain things about how not to, you know, cheat on your spouse, how not to be debaucherous in particular ways, but it never actually says that being pure has to do with not having sex before you're married. That was a cultural thing then that was placed upon the text at a later time. So it's really interesting that, can we not think of ourselves as something beautiful and precious that we want to protect from people that are going to harm us, but not in these ways that were taught to me when I was young, which is like, oh, you're chewed gum now. You know, like, here's a stick of gum. Now you're chewed. Who's going to want that? Right? Pre-chewed gum. No man is going to want pre-chewed gum in their mouth. Like, that was the most disturbing. That's a very disturbing image. Yeah. I'm pre-chewed gum, just
And I
in
think
case
that
anybody didn't know. Like, pre-chewed. Come and get it.
Oh my God.
I think that idea encourages rape culture, because it's like, well, they're already debased, so I can't debase her. Like, she's already so low, I can't bring her down. And I think that's where I've noticed in sex, quote unquote, sex positive spaces, sometimes there is this culture of like, well, you're here, so like, you're not innocent. We can just like, I've been to sex parties where people would just grab my ass because they're like, well, you're already, you know, impure or whatever. And that's not true. You can retain your innocence and your dignity and your self-respect in any environment. And if we viewed sex as less inherently shameful or like degrading, then I don't think we would have that idea that like, if someone is already putting themselves out there, then there's nothing to protect.
Yeah. If sex positive somehow gets lumped together with slutty, which is nonsense.
Mm.
Well,
word
me
I have
too,
mixed
because I
feelings
feel
about.
like it's a word that I like to kind of like take back in some ways, right? Like the slut walks and Jonathan Vaness, who is a person that I love from Queer Eye. We will sometimes use slut as a positive now, you know, like, ooh, slutty. And it's like a complimentary term. And I feel like it's kind of a nice thing, taking back that terminology.
I think the reason I have trouble with it is people assume I'm super slutty because of my profession. And so that I almost have the impulse to be like, no, I actually am very selective, but maybe you can be a slut and be very selective, or maybe you can be a slut and not have a lot of sex. But I think I feel resistant to that term because it's put on me like by other
Yeah,
people
and it
without
has
me
such
getting to
negative
define
connotations
myself.
with it because it is this very debasing connotation that is put with it. It's a very like, oh, you're chewed gum. Slut is a chewed gum kind of reference in a lot of people's mind. Yeah. Like you have debased yourself, therefore I now can debase you. Yeah. I find that with many people who are sexologists or sex counselors or therapists, that especially ones that are female presenting, that they get treated in that manner as well, that people approach them in a hypersexualized manner because they're like, oh, you talk about sex, you teach about sex, I must be able to approach you as a sex object, and that's super inappropriate.
I once had a guy on Hinge say it was my birthday, and he was like, I'll give you a birthday present of your choice. Let me know what you want, like an experience of your choice. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet. And I just been dumped by a guy who like really saw me as an object. And so I was like, I think what I want is for him to be a gentleman. And so I asked, how about you take me shopping? And he goes, wait, aren't you a sex coach? Since you're a sex coach, this only applies to sexual offers.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
just said goodbye. And he goes, wait,
Yeah.
but aren't you a sex coach? It's so, I don't understand. This was like a dude who went to Princeton, but his view of people is so myopic. Like,
That goes back to that expectation component too, right? Where it's you have X label, therefore you should react in a way that I think that label should react to. You know, there's like a halo effect almost with that, and I think that's super problematic and not very adaptive.
what's a halo effect?
Yeah, so a halo effect is I can't remember exactly which bias it's associated with, potentially confirmation bias, where you see one aspect about someone and you assume all other things in that person's personality is related to that. So in the context of disability, people might look at an individual using a wheelchair and then think all aspects of their life should be quote unquote disabled, or someone's attractive, you know, oh, they must be great at everything then. So it's seeing one thing about someone and overgeneralizing that one aspect to every aspect about that person.
Yeah, that's probably what I've experienced. I've stopped even writing that I work in sexuality on my dating app profiles because people do that. And I want to know people are interested in me, not because they think I'm going to have sex with them, but like because of who I am.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, that's what I have to do.
Yeah, we've been talking for 2 hours. We should we should probably start to wrap this up. Like you tried at one point because you were like, what are the courses and stuff that you teach? How can we get in touch? And then we were close to wrapping up, but then we started
Then we had
again.
such
Like
a
it
good
happens to
conversation
us
after
where we're
that.
just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
but let's follow this. Let's follow this trail.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a very ADHD thing about us that we can't seem to stop. We have to. There you go. Follow the dopamine.
You got to follow the
I know.
dopamine.
Yeah. Anything else, Suzannah? Like, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you feel like you really want to say?
No, I don't think so. And I am getting hungry, so it's
Perfect.
probably a good time to wrap up.
Well, seriously, thank you so much for talking with us today. And I know you said halfway through that it felt like a therapy session talking about personal life components. And I really thank you for opening up in that way as well and having a conversation about that, but then also letting us open up about some of our own experiences. It felt like a brave space to be able to do something like that. So thank you for your time today on that. And thank you for cultivating that space as well. And
you too. I feel like I got to talk about a lot of things that were on my mind and feel validated. So that was great.
That is excellent. Yes, that is always our goal here, is to just have open, safe space. So I really hope that you felt that was the case. We are so happy that you were here. I feel like we could talk to you for days. Hopefully at some point down the line we can have you back. And I am so excited to read the second half of your book, and I hope that everybody will go out and get it. We will put a link to it in our notes so that everybody can find it. It was just such a pleasure to have you. You are just doing some really amazing stuff. I am thrilled to have met you.
Oh, same to you. I'm glad that we met.
Serendipitous.
Put that on a t-shirt.
Rocco would put everything on a t-shirt. I feel like we would have 8,000 t-shirts.
I know. I feel like every episode there's something like that. Oh,
now,
all right.
Now
so
everyone's
now that
hungry.
you said hungry, I am getting hungry. I think I need to. Does someone have a coupon for a pizza?
I don't even remember what coupon it was that I was given to some fast food place that I wouldn't eat at anyway. So I gave it to someone else, but like it was the thought that counted.
It's just the gesture. That just I seriously I feel like I want to
No, it is a
carry
really
around
good
coupons
idea.
with me
Like
now.
I have had someone send me pizza when I was like, send pizza, and they were like, where can I get pizza from? And they actually sent me like a pizza, and it was the best. It's like the best gift to just receive a pizza. Yeah.
Acts of food is my love language.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Naboo was like, who's hungry? I'm hungry. He was like, I'm in. He heard the word hungry and he was like, yep, that's me too. All right. Thank you, everyone, for a beautiful conversation.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
You too.
Enjoy your lunch.
Are you passionate about accessibility and inclusion, but don't know who to connect with? We welcome you to join the Global Accessibility and Inclusion Network, founded by the creators of the Disability Tangent podcast.
Our mission is simple: to connect communities to available resources and create a supportive network of individuals from all backgrounds. Join us as we unite disability advocates from around the world to share knowledge, collaborate on initiatives, and drive positive change.
Whether you're an experienced activist or just starting your journey, there's a place for you in our network. To learn more and become part of this powerful movement, check out the show notes for this episode and sign up today.
Together, let's make the world a more accessible and inclusive place for everyone. See everybody. Bye. It won't let me leave. As hosts of the Disability Tangent podcast, we love hearing from our listeners. Your thoughts, feedback, and questions are what keep our podcast going and growing.
So if you've been inspired, moved, or even challenged by anything you've heard on our show, we want to hear from you. Share your stories, your insights, and your questions with us by emailing disabilitytangent@gmail.com.
Whether you're sharing a personal story, suggesting a topic for a future episode, or simply want to say hello, we're here and ready to listen.
So don't be shy. Drop us an email at disabilitytangent@gmail.com and let's keep the conversation going. Your voice matters, and we can't wait to hear from you.
That's all for today, folks. Until next time, remember to stay engaged, stay curious, and above all, stay connected. Thank you for listening.